I started the show about like 40 seconds early, and I'm just running it solo tonight. Mike had some things come up that just prevented him from being able to be here tonight, so here I am. It's just you and I. Quick question though, before I get going, I've got several people in the chat room. Is my audio coming through okay? I'm wired up a little bit differently than I typically am, so if you have a second, just kind of give a thumbs up or a thumbs down or throw something at your computer, make a noise, just something that lets me know that audio is still running okay from my end. Again, like I said, I'm running something a little bit different tonight. It's there, but there's a hum. Really not sure how I can fix the hum. I've got something else I can try, and I don't know if it'll take effect, but there is any better now. So there's some behind the scenes audio processing that can happen. Can't quite make out the tune. The tune is Looney, and it is you. Is it better? Okay, thanks, Bob. So yeah, there's some software processing that can happen using the service that we're using now, and some of the feedback was like hit or miss on whether you should use it or not. So I disabled it, apparently to no good effect. Good. So then I'll continue using that. I'm using a different lens tonight. I normally shoot with the 17 millimeter f1.2. Decided to shoot a little wider tonight, so I threw on the 12 millimeter f2. And you know what? I'll tell you what. So because I've got to fill time because there's one of us, yeah, I don't know how to stop the delay in audio. It's just going to look like a kung fu movie. You're just kind of stuck with it. Or I just move my mouth really slow. But so I've had a lot of questions directed at me about what my setup is for doing this broadcast, because the quality of it has improved significantly over what it was in earlier shows. So typically I'm running with an OMD EM1 Mark II, and I've got the Elgato Cam Link. It's this little USB dongle that plugs into the USB 3 port on the back of my iMac, and it's got a full-size HDMI connection on it. And then from that, I run out to a mini HDMI that plugs directly into the OMD EM1 Mark II. And then currently running audio again off of the OMD EM1 Mark II to this little cheap lavalier mic that is so basically all the audio and video are captured by the EM1 Mark II and fed through the Elgato Cam Link into my computer. And it's kind of hit or miss. I think on YouTube there wasn't an audio delay, and it probably, in all honesty, has something to do with this service that we're using, where there's a delay probably in my audio. And also it could be that I'm running off of Wi-Fi. I moved my cable modem to a different part of the house, and I'm just running this off of Wi-Fi, whereas before I was hardwired. So that's on my list of many things I need to get accomplished over the next few days, is to bring the modem back into this room so I can be hardwired in. Thanks, Rich. I'm hoping that it stays good. And I'm not sure what the delay is, what causes it. I know sometimes if I move too fast, it almost feels like the video needs to catch up. And again, I don't know if it's a restriction in my computer or my bandwidth. So regardless, I'm going to do my best to work through it. But that's the basic setup. OMD EM1 Mark II, usually a prime lens of one sort or another. Typically, it's been the 17 millimeter f1.2. Currently, it's the 12 millimeter f2. Again, run through an Elgato Cam Link. It's via HDMI and just a cheapy lavalier mic. Audio, I think last show I might have been working off of my Yeti, and it's been a while since I've used that mic. I love the audio quality of that better, but I found that having the audio source being pumped in from that and then the video coming in from a different device, I tended to run into more delay issues. And so I don't know, maybe I'll go back and give that a shot. I just hate having that big microphone sitting in front of my face when I've got the camera right in front of my face. What is it? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I'll figure it out at some point. And then for lighting, I've got a shoot-through umbrella on a light stand behind the OMD, behind my camera. And then inside of that are 4 40-watt LED. They're basically bulbs for track lights. They're a PAR 30, I think. They're the ones that look like a trumpet kind of. and those are plugged into that, and those have diffusers over those as well. The lighting tends to get a little hot as far as brightness is concerned. So what I would do is dial back my exposure compensation on my camera to just a quick level that out, because these are not dimmable lights. But now that I'm not running wide open at f1.2 and I'm at f2, I think that the lighting is just looking pretty good. So that's what I'm going to run through right now, was basically those things. That's kind of what I'm shooting with this video, these shows. Currently also a limitation of the service that we're using is it currently only streams in 720p. Kind of a bummer, because I definitely have the capability to stream beyond that. But supposedly in the next month or so, they're going to open that up to 1080. I don't care if they open it up to 4K. I don't think I have enough upstream bandwidth to pull that off anyway. So I'll be pretty stoked with 1080. Video quality will go up again from there. So that's the gist of the technical behind the scenes. Maybe at some point I'll actually do an episode where I take the camera that's recording the video and then I turn it around so you can kind of see what's going on the other side, but you probably wouldn't be too excited about that. Again, for those who came in a little bit late, hey, Brian, how's it going? We are running one man short tonight. Again, Mike had some things that came up that are more pressing than doing this show. Totally understandable. So I won't elaborate any further other than to say it's just me and you guys tonight. The things I want to talk about, initially, Mike and I discussed that we would share what we've been up to over the last couple of weeks, kind of focusing on shooting close to home, shooting far away from home, just kind of what we've been doing, and talk about, of course, as usual, the gear we used, the reason we chose the gear that we used. And then Mike was going to talk about the new Insta360 camera. Hopefully you've seen some of the press on that. It's this little tiny wearable device. It's pretty cool. Actually, Rich, not day job, more important than day job. Can you believe there are things more important than the day job? I can't, but there are. So Insta came out with this new little tiny wearable 360 camera, and I know Mike's dying to talk about it. So you can probably assume that on the next episode, we'll be talking about that. Super cool. I don't have a link to it. I'm not going to share it. It's not really in my wheelhouse, the 360 stuff so much. So I'll let Mike do that probably on the next show. But what I wanted to do is, it's going to be a lengthy, probably screen share episode. So if you're listening, wow, turn this episode off. It's probably going to be boring to you until you get a chance to swing over to the Facebook group maybe and check out the gallery of images that I'll post up over there. Again, audio-wise, I'll try my best to describe the images. It's probably not even going to be something that I try to do. This is just going to be really image intensive. I'll just jump right into it again, because it doesn't really make sense to just drone on and on about something that I'm just going to eventually get to. So I'm just going to do like a full screen share. You don't need to look at my mug while we're doing this. This episode, again, I hoped to have this announcement that we were going to make, that we're not going to make. There are a few people out in the wild that know some things that Mike and I have going on. And man, we just can't elaborate until we like put our names on some papers. But it's exciting news. But I will tell you that because of these new developments that are going on, they're good developments. I've been able to start shooting with some different equipment, and I've elaborated on it the last couple of shows. And I think I'll go into depth a little bit more about what I've been shooting with, and I would love questions from anybody as far as this goes. I'm just going to lead off with this first image. This was taken several weeks ago, and it was one of the getting towards the last images that I shot with the Fujifilm GFX 50R medium format camera. So Fuji sent me that camera on loan. I had it for about 3 weeks, and I wanted the experience of shooting with mirrorless that was outside of the Olympus ecosystem. I do a lot of workshops and teaching. There are a few people rolling around here in the chat room who've been on some of the workshops, some people several workshops. So you know that I'm always carrying an Olympus camera, and if you've got a question about your Olympus camera while we're on a workshop, 9 times out of 10, I've got an answer quick. But on some of those workshops I'm running into more and more frequently, there are people who are interested in Olympus, but they're showing up with their primary camera system, which isn't an Olympus for some people. You know, it's Sony, Fuji, a few Nikon users. So having experience outside of the world of Olympus is something that was kind of critical moving forward. And again, it's funny because, a little side story here, I did an event in the Eastern Market. It's in Detroit and it's the Detroit area, downtown Detroit. It's this big like open air market, like a farmer's market kind of thing with all kinds of vendors. And one of the people that was there, a regular watcher here, and I don't see him in the chat room tonight, Rick Kefchin, was there with us. And we sat down to lunch when the event concluded, and he looked at my camera, and he seemed so concerned. He said, "Are you making the right decision? Should you be shooting with something that's not Olympus? Are they going to be mad at you?" And he was so concerned about, because it's funny, because I've been shooting with this system exclusively for 6 years, and to see me with something different in my hand kind of freaked him out, But I explained to him that, some changes that are coming up allow me these liberties to be able to play on the other side of the fence, as it were. And that's what I was doing here. Again, when I was contacted by the people at Fuji to be able to take this camera for a test run, it was good to be able to say, yeah, send it my way. I'd be glad to shoot with it. The timing was very serendipitous. It was perfect how it worked out. So that's what this shot is with. This is shot with the GFX 50R, and I want to say 120 millimeter f4 macro. It was the only lens they had available for the camera. I could have waited another month and gotten that camera with a different lens, but I was just chomping at the bit, dying for just to get my hands on it and shoot with something different. I know Mike Ozinski's cracking up laughing because he saw me lugging that camera around Eastern Market as well. So anyways, so this was one of the getting towards the end of my trial run with that Fuji, and just experimenting around with bracketing focus. This isn't bracketed, with like 100 shots, so everything is crystal from front to back. I wanted to be able to take advantage of the wild depth of field that you get on a medium format, and the blurred areas that you can see in the image. Those are actually really, really close to the camera. We're talking, inches away. So I wanted that sense of depth by having some things that did stay out of focus, but I did want foreground elements in focus as well. So if you notice, there's a cone flower in the center of the frame down towards the bottom third. That's in focus. And if you look at the barn in the background, that's in focus as well. So basically, I just chose to basically choose my focus points quite far spaced apart so that I could kind of have these areas of in focus and out of focus. It's not the easiest concept to execute, especially on an evening when things are kind of waving and blowing in the wind a little bit. It's a beautiful night to be out there shooting, but it meant that I had to sit there for a couple of minutes and hope that that things were kind of back in the right spot in between frames, as I was snapping frames. But that's what this is. This is shot with the GFX 50R. Really no post-processing on it. The colors from that camera are bananas. It is incredibly beautiful color profiles that come out of that. These were JPEGs using one of the film emulations and then stacked in Photoshop to give me the depth that I wanted, the focus stacking. So, and if you're curious about the film emulation that was used, yeah, good luck. I honestly, I have it in a little notebook and it's not with me, but I want to say it was Kodachrome. I think that is one of theirs. It's just beautiful. Oh no, I'm sorry. I take that back. It was Velvia. It is their Velvia preset, which is just super rich in color. And like I said, it was a treat to use that camera. This next shot also was shot with something different than Olympus, and this was the one that really raised the eyebrow when I was walking around Eastern Market. This was shot with a Sony. And I know it's funny, people look at me like I was doing some crazy sin carrying around a Sony camera. But again, if I'm leading workshops and working with people, primarily if they're a mirrorless user, my experience has been they're a Sony user. So getting really familiar with their menu system and how things are set up, it definitely allows me to be able to more quickly and effectively help out those people on the workshops. I think I might have some Sony users that are coming up to the UP. From what I've been hearing in conversations, it sounds like that's a possibility. So again, having these experiences will definitely come in handy. And this was shot with actually an old Minolta lens. It's one of those things. Hey, how's it going, Bob? It is one of those things that I really love doing on my Olympus camera. So I was excited to give it a shot on something that wasn't Olympus. And actually I'm learning that it's kind of crazy. So the look that you would get putting this vintage glass on a full frame camera is very different than what you would find on Micro Four Thirds. The the sweet spot on most lenses tends to be towards the center, right? And if you've got a micro four thirds sensor, it's much smaller, so you're covering much more of the center of the lens with your sensor than you would be with full frame. So what you end up running into is a lot of soft edges and soft corners when you're shooting with full frame. I'm finding that across all lenses. It's funny, it's one of those things where I get to brag about the benefits of micro four thirds. If you're someone who really demands crisp, sharp imagery, boy, you really can't beat micro four thirds. And it took me stepping outside of my wheelhouse, outside of my comfort zone, outside of what would normally be my contract, to be able to find that out for myself. But, I'm learning that there are other benefits to shooting with the other systems as well. Really happy with the dynamic range that I'm getting out of these cameras. I can tend to push a file quite a bit further. And of course, shots like this tell you that ISO handling is definitely something, that tends to be a benefit. In the Sony cameras, it's really astounding. I do not recall off the top of my head. I'll tell you what, maybe I can do it this way. I'll pull up the inspector here and see. So this was ISO 4000 is what this was shot at. This the only post-processing on this image was basically a color profile that I've created in Lightroom. It's kind of a teal and orange, in case you can't tell by the majority of the color palette here. A teal and orange preset, but no noise reduction. And again, like I said, ISO 4000. This was, again, with the old Minolta lens. This was with a 28 millimeter f2.8. I had no autofocus lenses for the Sony camera, so tended to stick with these old primes. And this, again, was with the same lens. It was with the Minolta Roker 28 millimeter f2.8. This was a lower ISO. This was me pushing what I felt like were the limits of the in-body image stabilization in the Sony camera. I think that this was at 1/8 of a second, something around that area. Maybe 1/250th. I don't know. Somewhere in that time, I'm sorry, 1/4 to 1/8 of a second. Not the easiest thing to do. I think I had about 4 misses before I got one that I thought was usable. A learning curve for sure, and a lot of fun to run out at night. This was shot with Mark Miller, so he's one of the people that teaches on the workshops with me as well. Both of the fair shots where him and I met up in Jackson and went to the local county fair. I really recommend. I know we're getting outside of fair season. This was part of the whole trying to stay local and shoot and find something fun. If you have a local county fair, it is the most fun thing to go shoot ever. It's a blast. I'm not really big into the street shooting and all that, but going there at night and just underexposing scenes so that everything around just kind of darkens up, and then your highlights basically are going to be your subject matter, and the way everything is lit with neon and funky lighting and all the bright color, it's a blast. I had so much fun doing that. And then staying hyper local. So I might have shared some of these in the past. I know if you follow me on social media, you've probably seen almost all of these images that I'm sharing, but I've had this run of luck with this abandoned factory in the small town that I live in. I live in a very small town. We've just got a couple of traffic lights and that's it. So to be able to get into some place that is as large as this building is, which is very large. It used to be an old woolen mill back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, something like that, and has had many different lives over the decades. And its current life is one of inspiration for me. And you'll find as I go through these, I've had a thing for chairs lately. It's funny that the guy who is the barn guy is now the chair guy. I've had comments about that. I'm seeing a lot more chairs showing up in your stream. Is there something we should know about? I think that there's something that really speaks to me about an empty chair that seems out of place. Hey, how's it going, Seth? What's going on, man? I'm just telling everybody about my chairs, buddy. So again, this is in the abandoned factory in Eaton Rapids, and this was shot again with that Fujifilm GFX 50R. The lighting in here was crazy low. You can see in the background that all the windows had some sort of weird spray insulation over them, and then people had picked it off over time, or animals, I'm not sure what. So light filtered in, but this was really a dark scene. I probably should have thought ahead a little bit more and gotten the original file out so you can see how dark it was. I pushed this image quite a bit. The right-hand side of the scene, there was plenty of light over there, As you can see, there was a lot of insulation taken off of the windows. But when we get over towards the chair was just kissed a little bit with light. I did push this in post to make those highlights stand out a little bit more. But again, the dynamic range afforded to you within a 50 megapixel medium format file is pretty insane. And this was shot with their, I'm going to get it wrong probably, it's like a 35 to 64, which would be considered like a wide angle lens on that format. One of their ambassadors who lives here in Michigan was kind enough to loan me that lens for about a week and a half. And so I didn't have to shoot everything at a long focal length, so I could actually get out and shoot some wider stuff. And when I got the lens from him, this was pretty much the first place I went. I snuck in by myself, which I don't recommend you do if you're doing urbex. You should always have a partner with you just to be safe. But I couldn't resist. I had to run out and take that lens for a test run. So this would have been shot with the native ISO on the Fujifilm, which is going to be 100. And it would have been shot wide open on that lens, which I believe is 3.5 or 4. I don't recall. I'm thinking it's 3.5. And again, just a little bit of work in post, not a bunch, other than basically cranking the shadows slider all the way to the right and bumping the exposure up by about a stop. And then just doing a little highlight manipulation on the chair just to bring more life to it. Can you imagine that this file had the slider on the shadow slider pushed all the way to the right? It's, again, pretty cool to be able to do stuff like that. And that humongous sensor definitely makes it possible. Same chair, different day, different camera, different lens. So this was shot with that Sony. And I know you guys are probably like, holy crap, is he going to share any Olympus images? They're coming, I promise. So this was shot with that Sony camera with their 50 millimeter f1.8. This was me experimenting around with shallow depth of field just to see if all the hype is there with full frame, because everybody's always saying, oh, full frame, crazy shallow depth of field. Yeah, it's there. There's crazy shallow depth of field. I don't know that it's any more than what I would get on my 1.2 Olympus Primes per se. I feel like I misfocus more on the full frame camera with a narrow depth of field. I don't know. Your mileage may vary, but definitely fun to get in there. Definitely fun when the light looks like this. And this one is straight out of camera. No edits. This is just how it looked. It's kind of cool. Notice how soft it is on the edges here. Yeah, it was kind of weird. I didn't understand that. Next shot up. So again, last shot with the Sony for a bit, I promise, I think. So this again was shot with the Sony, and I had just gotten a hold of the Samyang 14 millimeter f2.8. And of course, went to the barn with my Olympus camera as well to do some shooting. The light was just turning incredibly great, and I was running a long exposure on my Olympus camera, which we'll see here in a minute. And I just wanted to stop down so I could get plenty of depth and see if I could get any kind of a sunburst. And I got a pretty good sunburst, but not good enough. So this one has been edited in Luminar, and I just used their little like sunburst effect that you can do. I know it kind of takes the magic away. You kind of give a little peek behind the curtain and it doesn't seem quite as fun anymore, but I love the way that this photo turned out anyways. Just how rich and lush all the greens are here in these soybean fields. A little bit of behind the scenes for what I was shooting. So I've been doing some long exposures and with the Nisi filters, and just wanted to kind of do a little shot behind the scenes. So the image displayed on the back of the camera is not the one that's actually in front of the camera right at this moment. That was actually just displaying the previous shot. The clouds had moved in between those because I kind of wandered around through the field shooting. But it's always fun when you're out shooting if you have the opportunity to just shoot a little bit of behind the scenes, kind of give people a feel for what's going on, a little bit of the environment, around the image. And it's always fun to do a little back of the camera shot. So these next couple of photos were taken at the Mirrorless Adventures meetup that Mike and I hosted down at Eastern Market in Detroit. Again, with the chairs. But I mean, come on. So it was my son, Mike Ozinski, who's in the chat room right now. And I think that was it. I think it was just the three of us. I think we were just kind of like the bosom buddies cruising around the back alleys of Eastern Market. And we were walking past this alley, and I'm sorry, but these orange chairs sitting in this alley that had this crazy bluish teal wall art on them. I thought, oh my gosh, this is a photo that just has to happen. So we went down the alley and started shooting, and I had to position the chairs. I staged the shot, and I'm not too proud to tell you guys that I staged it. It was fun to just kind of work our way around the chairs. And Mike Ozinski in the chat room actually got an incredible photo from the side looking down at. I seen him shooting it, and I'm like, okay, I'm not the guy that will just go right behind you and take the same shot, but I did because I loved his perspective. It wasn't something I was going to run off and try to lay claim to, but it was such a great shot, and now I know why he stopped to see it, and I just had to snag one for myself. I don't even remember if this was shot. I think this was shot with the Fuji with the 35 to 64 on it, if I'm not mistaken. Mike might remember. He's in the chat room. He can kind of chime in. But again, it's kind of hard to turn down all these crazy contrasty colors, and the chairs didn't even seem to fit in the environment. So when I'm out shooting in urban settings, that's what I'm always looking for. I'm just looking for something that just doesn't belong. These chairs totally didn't fit the environment, but they were begging to be shot, so that's what I did. And as things wrapped up, decided to take my son out and see if we could find a few more murals, things that we hadn't seen. And this was kind of a showstopper for us. There are actually photo shoots going on. You can't tell because I cloned the people out of the shoot just so I could get the shot. They were taking a lot of time to do their shoot, and I wasn't going to rush them. They were there first. So my son and I sat back and we watched them for about 10, almost 15 minutes before I thought, okay, I can clone these guys out where they're standing. So that's what I did. And then ended up posing my son in front of that wall. But in the meantime, while we were waiting, I just loved the way that the sky was so blue behind everything. It just made the wall stand out even more. And then trying to take advantage of this huge stinky mud puddle that was in front of it for a reflection shot. There was enough of a breeze to where the water wasn't still. I would have loved it if it was perfectly still like a mirror, but hey, I'll take what I can get. And it was fun just to be there with my son and get him, some pretty cool photos that he could take back on home and put them on his Facebook profile or whatever. I don't even think he does Facebook. Kids don't do that anymore. After that, I'm basically just running down the last couple of weeks for you guys. After that, I ended up having my buddy Seth, who's in the chat room tonight, come out, and he brought out with him a slew of old lenses. He's got literally just this giant bag full of fun old lenses, and they're all M42 screw mount, and I have an M42 screw mount adapter for my Sony camera, and he has one for his EM1 Mark II. So we thought it'd be fun to take all these shots and then just kind of compare back and forth what the different looks are, how different the feel you get from one camera system to the other with the same lenses. This was shot with if Seth's in the room still, hope he can remind me, but I want to say it was the Helios 44-2. And man, I urge everybody who's watching or listening to this, go to your local thrift store, go to your local pawn shop, pick up these old lenses. They're a challenge to use sometimes because it's manual focus. But just set a button to focus peaking, set a button to magnify. Just do whatever you've got to do with those little tricks to help you get your focus right. But the look and feel you get from these lenses is just out of this world, and it's addictive. So that's what Seth and I did, and that's the abandoned factory that the chair photos were taken in earlier. Seth and I spent, a good 2 hours walking around and exploring the area and taking these shots, and we really had a great time doing it. And I just want to say thank you, Seth, for bringing those lenses out and making me really lust after one lens in particular, which was I think a Super Takumar 85 millimeter f1.8, which I quickly learned I think is like a $500 or $600 lens. Yeah, it's one of those lenses. It's collectible. So again, a lot of fun. This was shot on the Sony. It's Olympus time, everybody. I promise you I shoot with my Olympus equipment still quite a bit. So this was from this past weekend. Spent some time in Ludington shooting with some friends, and waited for this sailboat as it made its way lazily across the horizon. And by the time it made itself into position in front of where the sun was, I still had this shot to take anyways. This was shot with the EM1 Mark II and the 12-100. And If this boat had been there 4 minutes previous, it would have been directly in front of the sun, perfectly silhouetted. But it was okay. It was a beautiful evening, a beautiful night to be out shooting with friends on the pier, and I couldn't ask for anything more. With shots like this, I just want to also mention, if you look at my landscape work, lots of times if I'm shooting in portrait orientation, what I end up doing is I end up panning upwards so that I have a ton of sky in my shots. This one, I did the exact opposite. I kept a lot less sky in the shot, and what I wanted was a ton of foreground. So I got down low, tilted the camera down low to capture as much foreground as I could and still keep interesting sky in it. The thought process behind it is because I want the water to lead you to the boat. You're going to be directed that way anyways because it's the brightest part of the image. And if you notice the framing, the boat is dead center. And I just say to things like that, rule of thirds be damned, golden ratio, golden chicken McNugget, whatever. I don't care. I wanted it in the dead center. I love the way this composition worked out. So I'm here to say, break the rules. The next shot was literally, I think, the next night, same place, which is like an hour and a half drive from where I camped. So I did a lot of driving this past weekend. This was shot with the EM1 Mark II as well, with, can you guess, the 7 to 14 millimeter, of course. And I have on my Nisi reverse graduated neutral density filter. The sun was just starting to set. I stopped down a ways to, I think, probably around F11, something like that, because I wanted to get this starburst. This isn't Luminar. This is actually in camera. But I also wanted to be able to start smoothing out the water just to show motion. It wasn't long enough to where you had glassed out water, but I wanted you to still see that there was movement in the water. And yeah, just a lot of fun. Just kind of move around in your location when you're taking your shots. I think I did the same shot 3 different ways. I shot it once with just a normal shutter speed where the water's completely frozen in place. It's hard to tell that there's much movement. Then I did one that was a little bit longer. This one is about a half a second long exposure. I think I did one that was almost 2 seconds. And I could have probably gone longer, but by then I was starting to run out of sun. The sun was actually past the horizon at that point. So I didn't continue on any further with that little experiment. These are a little bit out of sequence. This was actually the same night as the sailboat sunset. We were lucky enough to get the aurora to show up here in Michigan. It was hyped up all over the news, of course, like it always is, and wound up at Little Sable Point Lighthouse. And that was just me and one other photographer on that beach. There was no one else there to share in this incredible night. It was so wonderful to get out there. So I had the assistance of this other photographer to push the shutter button for me so I could run out and snap a couple of selfies. It was such a fun night. The aurora is so fickle and so short-lived. I think I spent more time watching it and just kind of living in that moment of being there. It's cool to be able to share it with another person there, you know. What a great night. And this was shot with the Sony with that 14 millimeter Samyang lens. Again, so this was at ISO 3200, and I believe this was a 6-second exposure. Pretty pumped with the way it turned out. Anybody that tells you that full frame doesn't have noise at high ISO is lying to you. So don't feel like you need to run out and try that just to get away from it. The noise is there. It's different. If you know how to work with any kind of noise shooting high ISO on your Olympus camera, you're probably going to want to learn how to do it on your Sony camera as well. And then finally, this last shot was from the same night, leaving after the aurora decided it was done showing off for us, headed out to the parking lot. And there is this little, it's a little Airstream trailer where you can go up and pay a couple of dollars. The money goes towards keeping the lighthouse in order, and then you get a free tour of the lighthouse and you can go up in it. Not at night though, not at 12 o'clock at night or whatever. But knowing that facing this Airstream is facing south, I knew that the Milky Way was there, of course. And to be honest with you guys, when you're in a location like Little Sable Point here in Michigan, you can pretty much see the Milky Way. So again, set the camera up, this again with that same Sony camera because it was the one that was sitting out of the bag, and just fired off this Milky Way shot. There is nothing better than sitting out under the stars and shooting scenes like this. It's such a magical thing, and I hope everybody gets the opportunity to to go do that. And I implore anybody who's never done it, if they've got questions about it when they're going out, please always feel free to get a hold of me. I love answering questions about things like that. It was a teaching moment for me that night on the beach. There's the other photographer who was there who had never shot the Northern Lights. So it was fun to get them set up and say, these are your settings. Watch the shutter button get pressed. The image pops up on the back of the camera, and to see the excitement in their face and know that you're there helping, it's just pure magic. It's so wonderful. And if I can help anybody out there who listens to this accomplish the same thing, I would love to be the person that can help. So again, feel free to ask questions about that at any point in time. You know how to get a hold of me on social media. I'm a pretty easy guy to find. And I guess that's it. I apologize that it was a show full of just images if you're listening. I am going to mention again and tease the fact that I'm going to continue doing these solo things where it's just me. I'm trying to work my way through workshop season. I've got a busy month this month. I've got 2 workshops, and then in between the workshops, there are things that I'm doing on weekends as well. So I'm kind of booked up. But I'm thinking once we get into October, I'm going to start doing this series where over on my YouTube channel, I'm going to start doing these live broadcasts where, like on a Sunday night, I'm going to sit down with you guys. I'm going to pick out 2 or 3 images that I had shot the previous week and into the weekend all the way up to the night before on Saturday. And I think I'm going to go through and then just go through my entire process. I'll talk about where I was at. I'll talk about what equipment I used. I'll talk about the settings that were used. I'll talk about why those were all selected. And then I'm going to go through my post-processing workflow. I get a lot of questions about, how do you get this look? What are you doing to compensate for this? Or how do you achieve that? And I think it just makes a lot of sense to just start sharing that. I learned a lot from watching YouTube videos, and I'm hoping that maybe I can just start sharing some of my techniques, some of the way that I do things, and then people will take those and make them their own and put their own spin on it, and it just perpetuates everybody creating. So hopefully you're interested in that. Hopefully you know how to find me on YouTube. I don't have a link that I'm going to share here. Just look me up. You'll find me, and subscribe to me over there, and make sure you hit the little bell so you get notified when I'm broadcasting live. When I do that, I'm also going to probably broadcast simultaneously over to my Facebook page, my public photography one, MacDonald Photo. So anyways, that's the show for tonight. I've got some whiskey to be drinking, actually bourbon to be drinking, and my mouth is dry, so I'm ready for it. You guys take care. Thanks for tuning in. As always, love having you guys as subscribers, and hopefully I get to shoot with you guys soon. You guys take care. We'll see ya. I forgot, there's actually 2 end buttons. I got to hit one and then the other one. So now I get to say goodbye for real.